Module Overview. This module offers a deep and comprehensive examination of judicial review and the principles of constitutional interpretation, emphasizing the critical role courts play in upholding constitutional supremacy and protecting civil rights. It explores the historical development of judicial review, its legal basis, the powers and limits of courts, and the diverse methods judges use to interpret constitutional texts. You will understand how courts arbitrate conflicts between laws and the Constitution, the influence of judicial philosophies on constitutional rulings, and the impact of judicial decisions on society and governance. The module also addresses controversies surrounding judicial activism and restraint, the legitimacy of courts, and comparative perspectives on constitutional adjudication. 1. Historical development and legal foundations of judicial review. Origins of judicial review traces the concept from early precedents in English law to its crystallization in the landmark U.S. Supreme Court case, Marbury v. 1803, which formally established judicial review as a principle of constitutional law. Legal basis in constitutions, examination of explicit and implicit constitutional provisions, empowering courts to review legislation and executive acts for constitutionality. Judicial review in different jurisdictions. Comparative analysis of how judicial review operates in common law, civil law, and hybrid systems. Scope and powers of judicial review. Types of judicial review. Concrete review. Deciding constitutionality in the context of specific cases or controversies. Abstract review, evaluating legislation outside of specific cases, sometimes before laws take effect. Judicial remedies, how courts nullify unconstitutional laws, issue injunctions, and provide remedies to rights violations. Limits on judicial review, political questions doctrine, standing requirements, and jurisdictional constraints. 3 principles of constitutional interpretation. Textualism, interpreting the Constitution strictly based on the text's plain meaning at the time of enactment. Originalism, understanding the Constitution in light of the framers' original intent or the original public meaning. Living Constitution, the idea that constitutional interpretation should evolve with societal changes and contemporary values. Purposivism, emphasizes the underlying purpose and goals of constitutional provisions. Pragmatism and balancing tests. Judges weigh competing interests and consequences in their interpretations. 4. Judicial philosophies and their impact. Judicial activism, when courts take an active role in policymaking and expanding rights protections beyond explicit constitutional text. Judicial restraint, advocates for minimal interference with legislative and executive branches, emphasizing deference to elected bodies. Impact on rights and governance, how judicial philosophy shapes decisions on civil liberties, separation of powers, and checks on government. 5. The role of constitutional courts and specialized tribunals. Dedicated constitutional courts, institutions specifically tasked with constitutional adjudication, their structure and powers. Supreme courts and ordinary courts, how different judicial hierarchies approach constitutional questions. Regional and international courts, influence of bodies like the European Court of Human Rights and the African Court on Human and People's Rights. 6 challenges and controversies in judicial review. Legitimacy and accountability, debates on unelected judges making decisions with wide-ranging political implications. Balancing democratic governance and rights protection, tensions between popular sovereignty and constitutional constraints. Judicial overreach and politicization, risks when courts are perceived as partisan or excessively interventionist. Case studies and examples. Marbury v. Madison, 1803, establishing judicial review in the U.S. Roe v. Wade, judicial interpretation of privacy rights. Korematsu v. United States, controversy over judicial deference during emergencies. Comparative study of constitutional courts in Germany, South Africa, and India. Learning outcomes for Module 4. By the end of this module, you will be able to explain the historical origins and legal foundations of judicial review, distinguish between types and scopes of judicial review, analyze different approaches and philosophies in constitutional interpretation, understand the role and structure of constitutional courts and tribunals, critically evaluate challenges facing judicial review in democratic societies.